Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Office Hours. It's just me this week, as Flo had to step out for something. But yes, welcome back. Hey, Bernardo. Hey, Emmerich. If this is your first time in Office Hours, guys, you're more than welcome to ask any questions. You can put them in the chat, or you're more than welcome to join me via the link I just put in chat, and we can go through it in person. Hey, Elena. The raw spacing on the grid does not seem to work. Can you show me an example of where you set it and how it visually works on your end? Sure, just give me 1 second. I'll set up a page with a grid. When you say the grid, Elena, do you mean the data grid, or do you mean a div that you've set the position to grid for? No worries, Emmerich. Feel free to put in the chat, or you can join me. Can you explain what the limitations that WeWeb has? A few people posted about this in the community. Yes, so I can't give you the technical description of it because I'm not a developer, but a base level, basically WeWeb isn't great at indexing. So for crawlers to see your site and index your site, it needs to be able to, your site needs to be pre-rendered, and those crawlers need to be able to index your site, as I just said. Unfortunately, WeWeb just isn't optimal for that kind of thing. So crawlers won't be able to read what they need to read in order to index it properly. Same goes for metadata, that kind of thing. Again, I can't speak about it too much on the technical side, but because of those things, because of it not being able to index extremely well, and for crawlers not be able to read the things that they need to read to index your site, WeWeb applications aren't great for SEO. If SEO is of complete importance and it's critical, maybe you have a marketplace where you want the pages to be public, like the product pages, and you want those to be as easily findable as possible via Google, something like that, then it's not perfect for that kind of thing. So that's where WeWeb isn't optimal for SEO applications, basically. Apologies, I couldn't give the true technical explanation, but that's the base premise. The sites, the pages aren't pre-rendered as optimally as possible, so they aren't as crawlable as they could be. No worries, Elena. I will try and find it on my side then. You said the raw spacing. And I know you've joined me in the lobby, Shamir. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to see if I can help Elena first. So I'm just going to share my screen. So the raw spacing. Is that a setting, Elena, for the raw spacing? Or what do you mean by the raw spacing? Sorry. There are some again, I'm not too sure, Emmerich, unfortunately. I've heard of people using different external services. One I think is actually called pre-render. I'm not too sure if they had success. You can, in hacky ways, better set up dynamic metadata of your page. But in terms of true pre-rendering, that I'm not too sure of if you can use external services. The rows are a set height. Okay. Let me check. Do I have some fake data? I don't have some fake data. Let me put in some fake data. So we have the grid height, we have the row height. So I guess you want to change the row height. Yes, I think this is the one you'll want, Elena. This looks a bit wonky when it's not adapting because the grid height is fixed. But I guess if I put this to auto, or I give this a different one, so let's say I give it 800. Yeah, so if you change the vertical padding scale, nothing happens for you, Elena? Because yeah, it seems like it would be the vertical padding scale. Nothing changes. Okay. Would you be able to join me and we can go through it in person? Because that's a very odd one. I'm wondering if there's some kind of, I don't know, niche case with how you set it up. Okay, no worries. Apologies. Doesn't seem to be working as expected. I shall hop over to Shamir. Hi, Shamir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Super. How's it going?
Perfect. Let me turn my screen on. Okay, there we go. Cool. Let me share my screen. Reload my data here. Okay. You can see my screen there?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I created this setup guide, and essentially how it works is the user navigates to any of these accordion elements here.
Mm-hmm.
They, it's supposed to be kind of like a fixed education page where I can add more elements over time and like show a user how to complete a task. So, for example, you got to configure some kind of threshold on their workflow. I have like a modal that comes up, some animation that shows them where to look, and some other points that they can click through. And at the end of this goes back to the main setup guide. Yeah, a lot of inspiration from the WeWeb community. So
nice.
Yeah. So one thing at the end of it, I was like, what's the best way for a user to track their progress, but also when they log back in later, they can say like they're 50% complete and they have some more things to go. So I did complete one flow here. So I'll show you the account information. It's very simple. You go here, and once you go back to the guide, it should update the progress bars percent. So in the data, what I did was I created points like weights and numbers of value. And what I eventually got to was that in order for the progress bar to update, I had to do a formula where the initial setup step was complete, like a Boolean statement for the first enter your account information. And then if it's true, enter that variable's weight, which is 14. And I numbered all these out. So I have about 7. So they're about 14. And the last 2 are 15. So it rounds off to 100. Otherwise, it's 0. So what I want to accomplish here is after each flow of going back to the guide at the last step of the workflow, each time the progress bar should update to the respective points. So 14, 14, and then 100%. And then maybe I'll make a button to reset so they can start over. So I got stuck at the first one.
That makes sense. I guess, so first question on this is the variable you set up, are you saving that in local, or is it just, I guess, default settings? Do you know what I mean by that?
No, I actually don't, I think. If you could.
Could you, on the left, could you click onto the variable? So the enter account info, the 14 points.
Okay.
So for context then, so at the bottom of this, you have preserve on navigation and save in local.
Right.
So the first one is kind of self-explanatory, preserve on navigation. So if you change the variable, when you change pages, it will save whatever's been input. But the save in local, that's local storage of the browser. So if they were to refresh the page, then it would still have the same value because the value has been saved in local storage. However, you probably don't want to use that because it's not perfect. If someone could like reset their cookies, and that would then reset local storage. So unfortunately, that isn't an optimal solution either. I just say that just for context of how you might have set that up.
Yeah.
So this isn't a straightforward one. What you'll probably want to do is create a table in Supabase that handles, or rather saves, basically all of the user's progress through these onboarding steps.
Okay.
So basically, whenever they complete a step, you save their progress, then you progress in Supabase, and you then refetch that collection. And depending on that data that you pull in from Supabase, you actually use that for the progress bar, because then you could permanently save where they are in the onboarding. Because if you use variables on the front end, your saving local storage might work, but at the same time, if they're using incognito, they refresh their browser, it will mess up the whole thing, unfortunately. So you would have to save it in the back end.
Very clever. I was trying to think of the most clever way to get past that. So it's actually a back-end workflow where after each of these 7 tasks are completed, completed, send value, and then that value is binded to the progress bar. And so each time and saved at the back end, it kind of progresses.
Exactly.
Is that going to be, so how do I get to the total sum of 100? So is it each time one value, or is it kind of like, and I know it's a more of a multi-step process, so I'm happy to
it would, so what I would recommend after this is to have a long conversation with ChatGPT and basically explain what it is you're trying to do and ask it what you should set up in Supabase from a tables perspective, because it's extremely helpful, because there's a bunch of ways you could go about this. Some are more complex than others. But in terms of what you asked about how you'd manage the value of the progress bar, I think what it would come down to is having it would be a formula, but the formula would be based on the number of steps as opposed to adding a bunch of point values. So at the minute, the way you'd done it is whenever the user completed the account information, you were kind of adding 14%. I think it was 14 points to the bar in some way.
Yeah.
But what probably makes sense is if you know the total number of steps, you can just divide that by however many steps they've completed and times that by 100. Or sorry, divide it by 100. I think divide it by 100. Yeah, to get the percentage value.
Yep.
Okay. So it would come, I think if you know the number of steps, the ideal way would be to actually calculate the number of steps there are from the back end, but that might be overkill. I think if you know there's always going to be 7 steps, you could just hard code 7 steps into the formula. But in terms of how many steps the user has actually completed, that you would definitely want to pull from the back end.
Cool. So I guess the variable 7, we can batch them, and if I add more later, I can change the variable or that number to a larger number, and then slice it that way. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is why I say it's, if you were to also calculate how many steps there are using something from the back end, that would be the ideal, because then in the future, if you add an extra step, everything's already set up anyway. It just adds a bit of complexity. Depends how you want to go about it. That's why I said it's after this, I'd have a long, hard conversation with ChatGPT just to figure out how you want to go about it. Because there's a bunch of ways you can go about it, but it all comes down to just having to do this in the back end.
Yeah, this isn't the most important visual feature. It was a last minute idea to kind of help someone remember. So I'll probably bookshelf it if it gets too complicated, and on the side backlog and launch it as something. Alrighty, thanks. That's great.
I just want to give you props for this, by the way, because when you showed me the little onboarding steps, usually you have to integrate some kind of external tool, and I guess that's all built in WeWeb, right? When you have the little guide buttons.
Yeah. So the cool thing is there are a lot of tools out there that cost thousands of dollars a month for just running a interactive demo, and so I had to get clever with a workaround. Level was I just used the new feature you guys had about the dialogue. So I watched your little video of the dialogue 100 times, and then I just had to spend probably 4 days creating the curriculum, and then each modal had its step, and then some animations, and then lowering the overlay, so it looks kind of just like the other products. So it was really helpful to do that. So
yeah, no, super cool, because we use there's a product called User Flow and also Guide Flow. And we use it in the documentation and stuff. And so when you first showed me that was the first thing that cropped to mind. But the whole thing is built in WeWeb. So yeah, super cool. Hats off, man.
Happy to advise if you guys need some help also. All right, guys.
Maybe in the future.
Yeah, man.
Cool. Right. Cheers, Shima. And there was a question in the chat from Bernardo. Is there an easy way to set up toasts in a vertical stacking way with the pop-up alerts? Imagine having multiple of them on top of each other. Currently my alerts are on top of each other. Unfortunately, I don't think there is if you were to use the pop-ups, so the pop-ups tab, and use a native pop-up in WeWeb, unfortunately, I don't think there is, because you couldn't put multiple pop-ups inside of the same div, so they couldn't stack. I think in that situation, Bernardo, if you wanted them to stack, I think you would have to use a dialog element, or you could use a div and just give it a fixed position. Because that way, if you use the dialog or you just manually create it using divs, you can have, in the dialog example, multiple dialogues inside of a single div, and repeat those dialogues. So you could, if you want to show multiple toasts, each time you want to show a toast, you could add something to an array and have repeat items on. And so then inside of that div, you could repeat the toasts depending on how many toasts there are and how many items you've added to the array. Or you could do the same with a div and give the div a fixed position. So unfortunately, I think off the top of my head, to use the native pop-ups, I don't think you could, because you can't, you wouldn't be able to place multiple pop-ups inside of a single container. They all have their own container per se. So I think you'd have to use a native element outside of pop-ups like the dialog, or as I said, manually create it using divs. And I see you've joined me in the lobby, Emmerich, so I shall switch over to you. Hey, Emmerich, can you hear me?
Sure. Yeah, thanks.
Hey.
Okay, so I have a few questions. Hopefully some of them are quite straightforward. So the first thing I wanted to ask was in terms of filters, so things like checkboxes.
Yeah.
What is the best way to build these I guess, according value, because basically the approach that I took for each individual value, I created, I guess, or I dragged an individual checkbox. But I have seen that some users basically make this a collection somehow, and then these basically kind of generate automatically. So that's kind of the first part of the question. The second part of the question would be, the idea is that with these checkboxes, I want to have like the multi option filter. So basically a user could, kind of check 2 boxes. And then if I do them individually like this versus kind of having a collection and the values to be generated based on the collection, which one is most optimal for what I'm trying to do, basically to filter based on what the user has checked.
Cool. Just to clarify the second part about the multi-option, do you mean as in if you tick open, beneath open, you then have a set of kind of sub-options?
Oh, no. It would be just like open, closing soon, and close as well. So, or I would say, basically, closed and awarded, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. I think so for the first part, you could get them to render dynamically. How you've done it, I mean, it's just kind of whatever you prefer. It's a preference thing. I think how you've done it in truth is the most straightforward thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And it probably makes it more manageable from a development perspective because everything is quite clearly differentiated and every single checkbox would have its own workflow that you can work with. You could, if you wanted to, as I say, set it up to render dynamically. So you'd want to have an array, and at a base level, probably the only things you would need inside the array is an object, and each checkbox would be an object. And the object would have the fields display and value. And so whatever you show for the wording would be the display field. And then whenever you click it, I guess right now, is any filtering set up whenever you click a checkbox?
No. So I haven't set that up, but that was basically, the question is like, if I had them set up like this individually, does that mean that I need to have a workflow for each individual, I guess, value? And then my follow-up question there would be is like, am I updating the same variable from every workflow that I'm doing?
You. That makes sense. Okay, yeah. So that's why I wouldn't recommend. Now you say this, I wouldn't recommend rendering it dynamically because it adds a whole bunch of overhead. Where, as you just said, it wouldn't be at that point. It is a single workflow, but it becomes way more complex. So the nice thing about these individual checkboxes is that whenever you check them, if you go onto the bug icon in the top left, it's just to the. It's beneath.
Oh yeah, in here, yeah.
And then you go to variables, the tab. In here somewhere, probably if you collapse from project, so the top, it says if you and then so one of these.
Okay, so I have
exactly.
So I can see these open.
So these, whatever the checkbox values are currently set to, they'll all be inside of here. So you wouldn't need a workflow on each to, I don't know, refetch the collection. On your collection, you'd probably have filters set up, like whenever you make the request.
Yeah.
And whatever filters you pass in would just be whatever values these checkboxes are currently set to. So you'd pass in the variables basically and do the filters that way. And because you've not rendered them dynamically, right now you have an individual variable for every single one. So as you see it here, you've got, I'm not sure if they're named correctly, but like if you click one, something will change on the left. So you can very easily manage them with these variable values. But if you were to render them dynamically, you then have a bunch of work you have to do to basically, whenever one is clicked, somehow update a variable that then you can identify which is clicked. It adds a bunch of overhead, which I wouldn't recommend unless it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, so for example, this one here, if I should be able to, if I do value. Okay, I can see that. And what you were saying here is that I can reference this in either the data collection or part of a I guess edge function input, something like that.
Kind of, yeah. So it's you could, I guess you're using Supabase for this.
Yes, yeah.
If you, and this data in the middle, is this coming from a collection? So you're pulling it from Supabase?
Yeah, so we're gonna get to that part in a second. No, this comes from an edge function.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And
anyway, you know, basically
one
what I
question on
have.
this.
Yeah, go on.
Is it broken up at all? So whenever you pull it from the edge function, is it paginating the data? Like, is it breaking it down into multiple pages, or is it taking
Yeah.
everything?
So that's basically the question where I was getting.
Okay.
What I wanted to ask here would be that yes, I'm paginating in the edge function. I guess I can't really, you know, there's nothing really to show here on that. But yeah, I'm paginating, and then I'm doing a few other things, kind of getting some individual numbers. But my point or my question was, how do I actually, you know, implement the pagination on the page itself? So I'm basically paginating, I think 20. So I'm bringing in 20 records at a time.
Yeah.
But then I'm not exactly sure, you know, how do I go on the second page, basically? I mean, I know how to do it, you know, with the regular data collection, but not with the edge function.
So what you would need to do is you would need to edit the edge function, so it takes a couple of inputs. The first input you would want it to take is the page number. So that way whenever you call the edge function, you can pass in a new page number. And then because of the filtering you mentioned, you'll also want some kind of inputs that take in the current value of different checkbox filters and then filter it accordingly. So you'll need to add inputs to that edge function, the code of the edge function, and then pass them in.
Sure. And just okay, so that happy with that. The another thing that I wanted to ask here, fairly quickly, and then I have a question on the breadcrumbs, and I promise I'm done after that.
No, you're all good.
But yeah, so I have this input. So this is a input. This is the component. I think it's called search with results or something. Yeah. So yeah, this one here. So I have that in there, and the reason I have it, the reason I've put it there and not as checkbox is because it's basically kind of querying from a collection, which is I think about like 60,000 or something like that record. So what I've done the same thing. I've connected this to a collection, so not an edge function or anything, and I'm paginating this with 10 records. But what I'm really struggling with is to actually get what I'm checking into a variable in order to reference it here in my collection in order to filter. Oh, where actually the other way around. Sorry. So what I want to do, I want to basically check these boxes so I can get the IDs or whatever the names here, and I want to be able to pass that to my main edge function here in the middle. So I think the passing, I don't think it's difficult. So I guess it would be the same type of, you know, storing it in a variable. So, but I'm struggling to store this in a variable. So right now, basically what happens is I'm only storing kind of the last value that I'm checking. So probably not kind of visible here, but yeah, anyway, basically what I was checking is that, you know, I'm basically only storing the last value that I have it as a checkbox. So I want to kind of store all of them.
That makes sense. So this is exactly what you bring this up. This is why I said I wouldn't recommend doing the initial thing you mentioned about rendering the checkboxes dynamically, because you have to manually handle now the whole checking logic, which is fine. It's all good. It's just adds a bit of workload. So what you'll need to do is, could you search for something just so we can see the elements again? And then could you go into edit mode? And then could you click on one of the search results? Probably the parent of this. So the container that holds, there we go. Have you got a workflow set up on this to do anything with it at the minute?
I don't have, well, I have at this.
Yeah. This is
So I
probably
was
better.
trying to kind of figure out. I was trying to kind of see if I can do it with some like JavaScript to bundle them. But yeah, so I have a variable that I created, org filter selected. But yeah, that's basically where I am.
Cool. So we can go through this now then. So what you'll want to do first is we basically need a variable to store everything that's been checked. And because it's multi-select, right?
Correct, yes.
It will be a list of data. So we'll want to create a variable. I don't know if you already have set it up. I think you do actually,
so I have
right?
this org filtered selected. Yeah.
And what type of variable is it?
So org filter selected.
It's an
So
array.
it's an
Okay,
array.
cool.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's perfect. So just before, if you delete actually disable the custom JavaScript, you might need it later on. So we can just disable it. Add a true or false split before save item. And what we'll want to do is basically we want to check whenever it's been clicked if it's already been selected. So if it has been selected, we want to deselect it. And if it hasn't been selected, we want to select it as opposed to just saving every item. So for the condition, for the true or false split, let's bind it on the right. And so here we basically want to check if it's been saved. And the way we'll know if it's been saved is if the array already contains the item. So in the formulas tab on the right,
in the formulas tab,
the F on the far right.
Oh yeah, sorry.
If you open up the array section, there's a formula called contains. There we go, that one, yeah. And if you hover over this, sorry, actually, yeah, you can do it here, that works. Yeah, so it checks if array contains value. And so the first thing it takes in is the array, and then the second is the value. So yeah, if you put in the array in the first input, yeah, I think it's that tab, yeah.
Org filtered selected, yeah. So I'm selecting the top level, so the array, and then the value
would be the ID, I think. And so now, so if it has been selected, it will branch into true, and if it hasn't, it will branch to false. So your save item at the bottom, let's drag that into the false branch. And yeah, delete the empty action. And then could you click on save item? Sorry, Emmerich, just to check that the logic got set up for it.
So I'm replacing.
So we'll want to insert it at the end.
Insert at the end, yeah.
Yeah. And what's you passing for the value? Are you passing just the ID on the at the bottom, sorry, where you've got the value bound on the right side?
Value bound.
So let's pass in the ID. And so then for the true branch, let's go for the true branch now. We want to do a similar thing, but instead of adding an item to the end now, we want to remove an item that matches our condition. So we want to remove the item that's been selected. So in here, for this one, on the right side, if you do remove at index, and then bind the index, we now need to use another formula to figure out basically the index of the item in the array that the person's clicked. So if you go into the formulas tab and open up the array one again, we'll want to find index. So on the second row,
find index by key or
just the find index, that one. Yes, just because it's we don't need to do filtering. It's just we need to find like the single value. So same thing, yeah. It takes an array and then a value. So basically what we did before, but just for this formula.
Yeah. So taking that and then ID.
Yes. And so if you put this into preview mode, I don't know if the UI will work correctly, but the variable should. So if in the debugger, yeah, exactly. If you bring up that variable on the left side, just so we can see it in real time, just to make sure that it's saving correctly.
Okay, so we have 0 items.
Yeah, if you click on it to expand it, we'll be able to see what gets added. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Brilliant.
And if you click one that's been selected, just to make sure that it removes it. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, perfect. Happy with that. Okay, so a couple of things down. Yeah. So the last thing ish that I want to check is this breadcrumb. So I think it's brilliant, kind of the whole breadcrumb kind of standard component, but I'm really struggling to get the last page sorted. So as you can see, I'm clicking on notices. It kind of does home notices. I do suppliers. It does home suppliers, but then when I actually click on a supplier or the same thing on whatever the page, I get this name thing. And somehow in my mind, that sounded very simple to say, okay, well, I have a text component, but I have nothing to bind it to. Kind of on the right hand side to say bind it, I guess, to the current page or something like that. So am I missing something here?
Have you actually, first let's check this. So if you go into the page drop down at the top left,
So in here, yeah.
And then which page is it we're on supplier details?
So
if you
it would be, so it would be suppliers would have been kind of the top one, and then supplier details, yeah.
If you click into the cog for this, just to go into the settings of it, and then you go on the URL paths.
Yeah, so I don't have, I guess, the parent.
How are you, if you go back to the supplier page where we navigate to this page from, I just want to see how you're...
Yeah, so I'm just doing a, I think just a URL. Yeah, so I'm doing page dynamic and then dropping the parameter of the ID of the supplier to navigate to.
So that will be, I mean, that should, okay, that makes sense. And have you tested this in live or staging?
Well,
like have you deployed it and tried it?
Yeah. Honestly,
because
no. I
think this might
the fact
be
that it was not there.
Do you mind publishing it and we try it now? Because unfortunately I think this is just a nuance of the editor, where because it's trying to pull it from the URL path.
Because there's no okay, yeah. My other question here would be: is this the best way to do? I guess transitions or navigation from like a collection page to an individual collection?
Yeah, you've nailed it. This is perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay, I'll try that separate to just actually see if it's there. On that, I asked about the pagination. About this. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think that's it from my side for now.
Super. You're more than welcome to ask anything else, by the way, because I think it's just you for now.
Oh yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, if it's just me and you still have a bunch of minutes,
Is there anything else on your list?
Yeah, I think because I've created a list. Yeah, so checkbox group, I sorted, drop down input. Oh yeah, this is the other thing. So I have a few other things. Well, a few things. So first thing I was going to ask is, how can I get this filter to stop here? So for example, when I'm scrolling down, to just make it sticky. So I still want my center kind of block to scroll down, but it's the filters that I want to, the filter panel I want to stop.
That makes sense. Could you put it into edit mode? And then if you click onto this, so you've got this div, could you click on the div that's above this just to see? Okay, so that contains both of those. If you click onto filters, I think this should be straightforward the way you've got it set up. If on the right side, okay, yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this. So for the position, if you put it to sticky, and then put the top to 0, and now try scrolling. So if you put it into preview mode and then scroll.
Oh, it still goes.
Let's try. So we might need to experiment with the amount. So if you put it back into edit mode and put the top position to like 200 pixels, I just want to see how it behaves, because we might need to experiment with this. And now put it into preview and try it. See if there's any difference. Is there any difference?
I don't think there's any difference. No. What I was really thinking here is if I could increase the number. here in order to kind of make the page a bit longer. So I think master supply is, if I do like 19. Yeah, because I'm wondering if it's just hiding underneath my header, basically. Yeah,
If you want,
so it's still kind of going in.
Okay, this might be, let's see then. Sorry, if you click on filters again, and if you click on this parent div above it again, just want to, yeah, this one, if you scroll down,
yeah,
just want to double check. This is the one. If you scroll down, sorry, no, on the page, I just want to see that it's okay, yeah, so it should move with it. Okay, if you click on filters again and go to that sticky positioning, if you scroll, actually, yeah, let's try this. So if you scroll on the page in the middle, if you scroll down a little bit, just kind of halfway, I'm going to experiment with this. Yeah, let's say here, and now put in like 1200 pixels for the top position on the right. I just want to make sure that it moves, because if it doesn't,
okay, so
there we go.
Now he moved. Yeah, he moved.
Yeah, so it's if you scroll to the top on the page in the center.
Like this.
Now, if you put the top position to like 500 pixels, we're now just going to need to experiment with this a bit. So let's try 400. Maybe like 380. And then just, you can use the arrow keys. Yeah.
350, yeah.
Let's try that then. If you put it into preview, see if it works.
Oh, that still goes there.
That's odd.
Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of one thing. But the other thing that I have, so I have this thing where I kind of do a bit of search. So CRM industry, anyway, so I get this. Yeah. So this part here, what I've done, I've somehow hard coded the sizes of these, just because while loading, what this was doing was basically just kind of being very tiny, kind of like this. So what I was really hoping was to kind of get a bit of guidance on what's the best way to, how you have those kind of skeleton loaders that you guys shared. I still haven't been able to kind of figure out how to use that. But I was wondering, what's the best way to kind of mimic that, to kind of mimic a kind of one size of this, and then it kind of starts, the kind of text comes in, and of course this expands as usual.
So you want to, just so I understand, that you want to basically add a skeleton loader that mimics like the structure of the page?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what you're probably, were you streaming the response there?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So that will be a bit tricky then for the skeleton loader, because when would you want to stop showing the skeleton? As soon as the streaming starts?
At the point that the streaming starts. Yeah.
Okay. So for the skeleton itself, what you could do is you could just add like a base skeleton to the page. So from the add panel, you could add our skeleton element.
So skeleton card or profile or simple skeleton, that should be okay.
Yeah, let's go with the simple one for now, and then we can just manually duplicate it if we need to. And then put it in, actually put it inside your yeah. And so there's a few ways you can do this. The way I like to do it is actually, could you put it inside your content? I think it's the content div, wherever you have the, or maybe it's not the content. Yeah, this one. What's this inside? It's rich text. Okay. Yeah, there's good. What I like to do with this is I actually like to give the simple skeleton an absolute position. So if you click onto the simple skeleton and on the right, you go down to that position select. If you give it an absolute position, it will now position itself absolute, and it won't care about what's inside of its container. And so you have, I guess you have two options for the thing that's behind it. So this rich text, you
Mhm.
could either put its opacity to 0, or you could put its display to off. Probably both would do the job.
Mhm.
And then you would basically just want bindings on whatever you choose to use, the opacity or the display, and then vice versa for the skeleton. So that whenever basically, I'm not sure how I haven't actually used the streaming response before, so I don't know what you could use
would
in that
count
response
as a
to
start,
figure out
yeah,
when it
yeah.
started. But
Mhm,
whenever,
mhm.
basically, you just want logic around when it has started to control the display of both the skeleton and the text.
Yeah. Well, I do have the loader here. Yeah, so I have a formula for that. So WK loader. Yeah, I think I'm triggering that somehow. So I am controlling that because you know, I have a loader whenever I kind of click on the pages. Some of the things are happening. Okay. So that's kind of the best way of doing that. I had the search filter, yeah, the settings. Scroll down. Yeah, I have that one. Yeah. So I think that's it from my side. To be honest, like the biggest thing at the beginning was the whole SEO thing. Just trying to figure out, I guess, you know, what's the current state, because
Yeah.
it's probably kind of not it's a bit of a mystery, I guess. Everyone is kind of trying different things, and I know it's somewhere on the pipeline with you guys, but at least just figuring out what the current state is with that.
Yeah, no, apologies, I couldn't give you more of a technical answer. I just know that the rendering process isn't ideal. And so because of that, when the crawlers go through the site, they can't crawl everything effectively. I mentioned when you asked about if you can use external pre-rendering services, I've heard of people experimenting with them. I couldn't give you a concrete answer whether or not they work.
Yeah,
But
I
what
booked
does
I
work?
booked a call with them. Yeah, I booked a
Okay.
call with them for tomorrow. Um and I've seen on the forum some people kind of mentioned them not working, and then some people said you know, they probably
Yeah.
made some changes in the last few months, or I'll see what they're saying tomorrow. Yeah.
But what definitely does work is setting up dynamic metadata. I believe it's through Cloudflare workers, but I haven't done it personally, so I'm not 100% sure. But I know you
Mhm.
can, in hacky ways, set up dynamic metadata. So that's definitive. But in terms of using the external pre-render service, I'm not too sure.
Mhm. Okay, so dynamic metadata, ideally using Cloudflare.
I believe so. I'll need to check
Mhm. Sure.
with the developers if that's kind of still the recommended best practice. But I believe, yeah, it was using Cloudflare workers. You could set up the dynamic metadata.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for the help. I'll see if I'm coming with more issues, or I say issues, you know, kind of next week. But yeah,
No worries. Cool. Right. Cheers, everyone.
perfect. Okay,
Take care.
cheers, bye.
Bye. Hey, Shamir, I just saw your message. We shall switch back over to Shamir. Do you want to walk through the issue, Shamir?
Yeah. I'll just set up here.
Cool.
Okay, so I have this item that comes up here, this modal.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I open it up, like on a desktop or something, I notice that it'll move its vertical position. Like if I expand the page, you might get a better. Yeah, it does that because it goes away from the original position. I had put it above the settings line, and sometimes it goes higher. So I was trying to play with the position here. I got the top and the left, but I think it still persists to move its position. Like if I'm on this laptop, it's fine. If I go to something else, it kind of moves. I was wondering how
Yeah.
to fix that.
Unfortunately, because of the fixed position,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't really a simple way to do it, because it's doing what it says on the tin, in the sense that if it's set to 420 pixels from the top, if the screen gets longer in height, then it's still going to stay 420 pixels from the top. And so because of that, on different screen heights, it'll be in different places.
Yeah.
What you could potentially do then is is the top position the main culprit? Like it's the thing where it's going wrong, the top position, would you say?
I think so. I think it might be the top.
What you could experiment with is if you bind the top position.
Mhm.
So if you go to the bottom and you press the plug icon for the top position.
Yeah.
If you go to the middle tab in this, so the data, like the collections tab.
Yeah.
Sorry, just above this, that one, yeah. If
Yeah.
you open up the screen, so on the left, if you click the I think it would be the screen size you want. So if you expand the screen size, you have the height here. And so I think you could use the height and then minus a certain amount and use it this way. So you'd want to pass in the height. Actually, we can do it now just so you have the formula. So if you pass in the height here, if you click on height and then put like minus, I don't know, 200. And then at the end, just put plus. And then pixels in speech marks. So PX. You just need to, yeah. And just, you need it in speech marks. So I think you could do something like this, and you just have to experiment with the formula to see which is the right amount you want to take away.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Okay, that's really helpful.
One thing on that, you use the screen size, but you might want to use the page size. Just thinking this through.
Okay, not the screen.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Just something to experiment with if it's not working correctly, because like if you've got it open in a browser and you kind of reduce the size of your tab, it's going to use the screen size instead of the page size. So you might actually want to use the page size. Now I think it through.
Okay. So I'll
just as a heads up.
The page size and the screen size.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, sorry. No, I mean as in that the height of so if you expand page size, you want the height from here. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And then experiment with that.
Okay. I'll play with this one. All right. Cool. Thank you.
No worries. Super. We've got 5 minutes left. I don't think there's any more questions in the chat. So I think that's us for this week. Thanks everyone so much for joining. I'll be back next week. I think Flo will be with me again next week. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it this week, but I think he'll be back next week. We're here every Tuesday evening in Europe anyway, 6 to 7 p.m. Central European time. And yes, again, thanks everyone for joining. I shall see you next week. Cheers.